Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Nick Kroger, and today we have with us Chad Magnuson. He's the Regional Emergency Services Officer with the American Red Cross. Chad, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to end up at the American Red Cross, which I think is a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I've been with the Red Cross about 12 years. Shortly after I graduated from college, I started working for the American Red Cross. And really my first job with the Red Cross is I worked for the Services of the Armed Forces Division and was what's called a station manager. So I got to go work with our military around the world at deployed locations like the Balkans and Iraq, and deliver emergency communication messages and work with outgoing and incoming troops. That kind of started my Red Cross career years ago. And it's really kind of developed into now working in disaster services and emergency services and so on. And I've had a great career. I've been able to move and travel around the world with the Red Cross. I wouldn't have wanted to do anything different.
Right. Well, and you kind of have to be called to that and be
Absolutely.
wired a certain way, and we're grateful that you are. I know you mentioned initially in your career working with the military, and that's kind of why we're here this morning, the first segment anyway, to talk about the needs of our military families, some of the transitional services. I think a lot of people, almost everyone watching, is so grateful for what the military does for us each and every day so that we can have what we have. But a lot of times, once they've come back and done the most visible part of their service, people tend to forget what it takes to bring them back and integrate back into life.
Sure, that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, of our time right now, working with our military. And the American Red Cross was founded on the battlefield during the Civil War. Claire Barton was a nurse that took care of wounded troops, both north and south. Whenever she saw somebody suffering, she took care of them. And the Red Cross continues that tradition even today. When we have troops that are deployed overseas, if a family member needs to get an emergency message to them, a death in the family or a serious illness, or even a happy occasion like a birth, they can call the Red Cross and we'll deliver that message to them no matter where they are, anywhere in the world. And if they need to come home for a funeral to be at the bedside of a family member, the Red Cross supports their travel and making sure they get home safely to be with that family member. But even today, as troops come back, we're learning a lot about what they're struggling with and coming back to an economy that's not so great.
Right.
And they've been in the military for a few years. They've been in battle. They've been in combat. They're coming back to an economy that is struggling, trying to find work, coping with their families, relearning how to be a husband again and a father or a wife for military members that are female, and being a mother to their children. That's a tough transition to make. And it takes a lot of effort, a lot of community support to get veterans through that transition process.
And I would imagine having such I envision it being a structured life,
Yes.
While they're serving or while they're active, then coming to a life that all of a sudden you have time on your hands and you have to make some choices for yourself that were made for you in the daily structure of being an active military person. Even that can be a difficult transition.
It really can. When you're forced to wake up every day at 5 a.m., you have a duty for the day, you come back, you eat at certain hours, and you have a very regimented routine. Coming back to, we're not sure what the next day is going to bring. If they're going back to work, with the work environment, it's going to be like that. Sometimes it's a very unstructured environment, depending on where you work. Worked with a gentleman a few years back who was a sales manager at a luxury car dealership. And he was a reservist, deployed to Iraq, came back, and really just couldn't cope with just that lifestyle again of kind of working in sales and having to meet a quota and so on. And he really struggled to fit back in that lifestyle again. It took a lot of counseling on his part, working with the VA and others, to get him to where he can go back to his normal life once again.
Well, I'm sure they're very grateful for that. Now, talking a little bit about that, how do you go about, or how does the Red Cross link military families and provide some of the local resources and the support services such as you're talking about?
Absolutely. The Red Cross is a great entry point for veterans and their families to see what kind of services are available in their community. We have a whole list of resources that we can provide to folks seeking assistance, or just someone to talk to. Veteran support groups, the VA itself, American Legions, VFWs, wounded warrior programs, and so on. We're a great entry point just to see, what are my needs? What do I need? Do I need financial assistance? Do I need job placement, job training, family counseling? Whatever it may be, the Red Cross can kind of guide them in the right direction. We also offer, some training courses for military families on how to cope with deployments as well, how to handle that separation, and of course handling their return as well.
And so that would encompass not just the active military person in the family, but the family itself,
Right.
Being able to receive a figure, be it father or mother figure, back into their life that possibly has been gone for a year or more.
Absolutely.
And absent. So there are services to help the family readapt to that person coming back as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The family moves on many times when the military
Right.
member is deployed.
How we cope.
Exactly. Children go to school,
Right.
they grow up, spouses may go back to work, things move on, and it's not always the same when you come back and reunite again. And families have to understand that the military member may have changed, and the military member has to realize that their family may have changed. And how do you kind of relearn each other again and relearn to be a family again? And that's a difficult transition for a lot of people to make.
Do you find in your experience in working with military families and individuals that what is the hardest transition? I know that's a loaded question because it depends on the person and the family situation, but is it the job? Is it the lack of structure? Is it actually integrating back into the family from an emotional perspective? Where do you find the struggle to be?
Yeah, and you're right. It's different from person to person based on their own well-being and what they've been through and their own experiences maybe deployed as well. But many times it's just, for most folks, most veterans coming back, there's a short transition time to kind of relearn to be a family again. And then they're back to normal and
Okay.
everything is great. But for a few families, that is a definite struggle. With kind of modern communication now, military members can communicate with their families more often. They can Skype, they can call, no matter where they are in the
Right.
world. So at least they can see their family member.
That's true, yeah.
They know they're okay. 10 years ago, you really couldn't do that.
No, yeah.
One phone call every other week, and that was for a couple of minutes, and that was about the only communication that you had. So I think that's a positive thing, that military members are able to communicate their families on a regular basis now. But still, emotions change, feelings change, and we just want to have military members and their families just realize that the military member and the family has moved on or has grown, has changed a little bit, and that they need to kind of learn how to readjust to each other and accept the changes that may have come about because of a long deployment or a long separation like that.
Let me ask you this. When does that, be it counseling or just providing them information or in some cases just provoking the individual that's serving to start thinking about that, about reintegrating? Does that happen where they are once they know they're coming back? Does that already begin over there, for lack of a better word, rather than let's get you home and then let's worry about that?
It does really start over there, over at the deployed location.
Okay.
They debrief. They debrief with chaplains. They debrief with mental health providers to kind of get so they're not coming back just unprepared. Raw, exactly, exactly. So they do go through those debriefing sessions, and many times, and the Red Cross participates in these, we have what are called yellow ribbon events, is where family members and the military members all kind of get together. And often it's here in Orlando over at Disney World or some other places, and there's a series of presentations and workshops that they can kind of ease that transition back together again. At the same time, have a good time and enjoy each other's company. Early on in some of our deployments, they just came back and, oh, hi, I'm home. I'm so happy you're home.
Right.
Like, okay, everybody's happy they're home. That lasts about an hour, and then getting back to normal life again. And that was always the struggle.
Well, let me ask you this: just as I listen to you talk, and I'm sure some of the viewers, are listening and thinking as well. To me, someone who's gone through it, probably successfully, is probably one of the better individuals to help another.
Absolutely.
Within the Red Cross, do you have veterans and people who have served in the military that have come back that have the opportunity, whether it be volunteer or to help with other soldiers coming back with that transition?
Yeah, we do support a lot of military support groups, and we have volunteers with the Red Cross that are veterans that have served overseas that are more than willing to take the time to speak with other veterans regarding whatever concerns they may have. We have a great deal of materials about coping with deployments and transitional issues and so on that they'll go down and kind of discuss with them. We really work with a lot of the VA hospitals and the support units that they provide. As we're very lucky in Central Florida that there's a number of veteran support groups. There's not a large active duty military base in Central Florida, but there's certainly a lot of veterans in Central Florida. And we've been real lucky here to be really well equipped to kind of deal with some of these issues.
And we've talked a lot about the people who have served that are coming home and the integration, but then there are those that are coming back, maybe not the same person. They've been wounded. Be it physically or in some cases, what they've experienced has affected their emotions and their personality. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, as you know, as most people know, that we have a lot of issues with post-traumatic stress disorders and traumatic brain injuries, and the military and the Veterans Administration has gotten really good lately at really kind of working those issues through our Wounded Warrior programs. In Tampa, there's a big Wounded Warrior program at the Veterans Hospital over there. In various locations in Florida, there's many Wounded Warrior programs where they can kind of go and seek counseling, speak with mental health professionals, chaplains, whatever their needs may be to kind of get through those issues. And the Red Cross certainly supports all those organizations and guides people who come to us to that professional help when we feel that's really necessary.
Well, I think all of that is excellent, and I know we're going to be putting up on the TV screen a website that you can go to find out more information. And I think it's important to hear what the Red Cross does and who they partner with and the practical real help that they give, not just the military in times of a disaster, but all the way trickled down to the families themselves. So it's important for us to support the things that help support our military. So
absolutely.
I'm glad you're here. I want to keep you here. We're going to talk in the next segment a little bit about unique disaster preparedness for our area here in Central Florida. So Chad, stay with us. Viewers, don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with more Joy in Our Town after this short break. Back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Nick Kroger, and as promised, we've kept Chad Magnuson here with us, Regional Emergency Services Officer with the American Red Cross. And Chad, you were a wealth of information as we talked about our military in that first segment, but I want to talk a little bit more about disaster preparedness, specifically for our families here in the viewing area, Central Florida and beyond. We're a little unique in what we deal with compared to other parts of the country where you and I maybe grew up. Why should every family be prepared for a disaster? Why should they think about it ahead of time?
Well, Central Florida, I like to say, is very disaster prone. If it's happened, it's probably happened in Central Florida. Maybe other than a volcano eruption and a blizzard, we've had everything from tornadoes to hurricanes to wildfires to even an earthquake one time. So we have to be really prepared every single day for disasters in Central Florida because they tend to happen here on a regular basis. So as we go out and speak to our community and talk about disaster preparedness, we want to make sure all of our residents really have a understanding of what to prepare for, that they're not immune to disasters here in Central Florida. And it's always just not hurricanes you have to worry about. We recently had a tornado earlier this week. And Central Florida is one of the most tornado-prone parts of the entire state of Florida. We get more in Central Florida than any other part of the state, often in January, February, and so on. So we have to be prepared for that type of really severe weather. So we ask all of our residents, please take some time, put together a disaster preparedness kit, 3 to 5 days worth of supplies. If you can do more, fantastic. Water, canned goods, a bottle opener, flashlights, batteries, weather radio, a first aid kit. All those items that'll help you get through the first few days following a disaster if you're affected. And also make a plan. Where are you going to go if you're told to evacuate?
Right.
Is your plan to go to a Red Cross shelter? Is your plan to kind of leave town and go stay with a relative somewhere else? Is it to just stay with a friend nearby in another part of the state? And once you make your plan, make sure your family knows your plan
right.
as well. Don't just make it up in your head and not tell anybody.
Right, and create panic.
Exactly, and also tell your grandparents in Chicago what your plan is, so they know where you may be during a disaster. So everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows everybody's going to be safe following any type of event in Central Florida.
Well, I know we talked a little bit about tornadoes too, and growing up more in the Midwest, in the northern states, when we had tornadoes, we had basements.
Right.
And here in Central Florida, typically you don't. So, and because we're a transient state, most people have come from other places. So in that type of a scenario, how do you re-educate your mind? What is the safest place? Because, like I said, we're more apt to where's the basement.
Right. No basements really in Florida.
Right.
Very, very few.
Right.
A lot of water right down underneath your house. It's one of the most common questions we get. What do you do in Florida when there's a tornado?
Right.
And basically, it's a very simple answer. If you're at home, go to an enclosed room, no windows. If you can, take a mattress or pillows, put them over your head, and just wait it out as best that you possibly can. If you're at work or at school, follow the tornado drills that hopefully you've been practicing. You've had. Go out into hallways, cover your head. Most important thing is to cover your body and prevent any debris from falling on top of you, and that's where most injuries are really caused.
Excellent. Well, I know. Give us the types of scenarios that are typical. We talked about that random earthquake or that, but what is it that Central Florida deals with? Tornadoes,
wildfires for sure.
Absolutely.
Almost every day, we're in the wildfire season right now.
Right.
And it's been so dry during from like November on through January. It's very dry, and so wildfires spark up all the time. And sometimes you have to evacuate your neighborhood because it's so close.
Right.
So we often deal with evacuated neighborhoods where we will open up a shelter for those folks to go until it's safe to go back home. Wildfires is probably one of the most common disasters that we really have here in Central Florida. And then, of course, when it does rain a lot, we get a lot of flooding.
Right.
And when the ground gets really saturated, it rains, and we have rivers and ponds and everything else that just tend to overflow. So if you live near one of those locations, flooding is a real concern to you. Some folks in Central Florida are very resilient.
Right.
They've just kind of learned to deal with the flooding. But other times, during this past year especially, a lot of people flooded that never had flooding issues before.
Right.
And they didn't know really what to do about that. And there's not a whole lot you can do about water.
Right.
You just get out.
Yes.
And then when the flood waters recede, you go back in and clean up as best that you can. But that's a long, arduous process, and you have to be prepared to be out of your home for a long period of time if your home does flood like that.
And I know we deal with hurricanes.
Absolutely. Well, of course, hurricanes was.
That's our first name, right?
Yeah.
And being stuck out there in the middle of the ocean, there between the ocean and the Gulf, we tend to, get it from both sides. And with the hurricane are the winds and the tornadoes and the rain. But people the media pushes a lot on hurricane preparedness. How similar is it to having a plan for a tornado or flooding or?
Yeah, and really hurricane preparedness, a lot of it also depends on where you live. Mm-hmm. If you live in more of a coastal community and you're in an evacuation zone, and emergency managers say it's time to evacuate your neighborhood, your community, you really got to do that. It makes no sense to stay where you are thinking that you're going to be able to fight the storm.
Right.
You need to leave, especially if you're in a coastal community, because the wind is dangerous, but the surge of water that may come on shore, like in New York City this past few months ago, that's what caused all the damages, that wall of water that comes on and just destroys homes for miles in.
Right.
So you need to run from the water, hide from the wind.
Yes.
And so if you're in a coastal community, evacuate. If you're in Central Florida or in an inland community, you may also want to evacuate, but you may want to evacuate to a local shelter that the Red Cross and the county set up for residents to go to, and that's a safe place to be.
Tell me, in your experience, I can imagine, I'm just thinking of all the different personality types and age demographics,
Sure.
When an evacuation has been ordered and Red Cross has, shelters set up, there are just certain types of people that will not go.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Or maybe somebody watching I have a family member like that, where for some reason they're just bent on it.
Right. A lot of that's from past experience. I survived this storm, and it was no problem. The crying wolf type of thing. They said it was coming and it didn't come. And so people think that it's just a fate, that they're going to survive every storm and be safe in every storm. But it only takes one. It only takes one storm, and it's going to that could destroy their home. It could cause them injury or worse. And why would you want to take that chance? You can always rebuild property. You can't, obviously, it's a lot harder to recover from a serious injury or, of course, the death of a family member or something like that. You don't ever want to have to go through that trauma and that tragedy.
Absolutely. So don't stay.
Yes.
And it's okay to be forceful and adamant with those family members that want to try and stay. I know that school buildings house hundreds of children during the day. How are our schools prepared for disasters?
Yeah, schools in Central Florida do a great job in really preparing their students and their staffs on how to kind of prepare for disasters. Many of our schools are used as hurricane evacuation shelters.
Yes.
So they're hardened facilities with generators and so on. Many of the kids in the schools go through kind of a little bit of training on what to do for disaster preparedness and hurricanes and so on. So I think our schools here in Central Florida do a good job to prepare our kids and their staffs.
Well, and do you think that, I know a lot of times when I was a kid, we would do these drills. I was the Midwest, so it was mainly tornadoes.
Sure.
And you really don't, your hoping muscle memory kicks in, I imagine, as the teachers and the adults, because the kids don't always pay attention. As a family, is it good not only to have a plan for if you're all together, but to talk about, if I'm at work, if you're at school, and to kind of talk through those scenarios with their children or their family?
Absolutely, because you never know where you're going to be when an evacuation order may strike. So you really want to have your family know what's going to happen before the event happens. And really just sit down, have a family meeting, take an hour and talk about how we're going to communicate with each other. Make sure that your children know your work phone number or have access to your work phone number or your cell phone number. They may not be able to memorize it, but they will have it on them somewhere so they could give somebody else that number to call. Make sure they know their address. Where do they live?
Right.
If there is emergency personnel, if people become separated, they need to reunite families. Where do I live? What's my address? And so on. So if you can just sit down an hour prior to hurricane season, maybe like in April or May, talk through all those issues, start building your disaster preparedness kit, because once you are together and the power is out, you may have to leave home or whatever it may be, you still need to eat, you still need to have fresh water, you still need to have batteries and a flashlight and a radio and all that good stuff to kind of get you through that very stressful period of time.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking too, we live in a day where, in our phones is that parent's picture and mom, and you click it, that a lot of them eventually forget or don't remember what the actual number is.
Right, exactly.
And so to actually know the cell phone number of your parents and the family members that you need is crucial.
Absolutely, and also remember, cell phones run on power, on power, electricity. So if power is out, you may not be able to recharge your cell phones right away.
Right.
So a good old landline phone in your home is also good.
Yes.
How we can just plug into the slot and you're good to go.
I know we talked a little bit about what happened in New York recently and with the hurricane and all that it brought, and those cases are uncommon, specifically in those areas. But what is one simple thing families can do in a practical sense, which would help in a disaster, more bang for your buck? What is the best thing to be prepared about that will benefit them in the event of having to put it into place?
Really the best thing, like I said, the best thing any family can really do is get a plan together, and everybody knows the plan. Red Cross, we have various templates that people can download and kind of write up their plan, answer some very simple questions, and it prints out a plan for you and your family. But really the most important thing to really know is that listen to the authorities. Listen to the people that are trying to keep you safe. Because they really want to keep you safe. If it's the Red Cross, if it's emergency managers, if it's your local elected officials, governors, if they're saying evacuate, if they're saying you need to leave this area because it is not safe, please follow those orders. Because the most important thing is that we want you alive.
Right.
There's nothing more important than your life. So just keep safe, keep your family safe. Everything else it may take some time, but we'll rebuild. We'll help you rebuild. We'll help you get the resources in the community to help you rebuild. Get those. We'll provide you with food, water, shelter, clothing, whatever you may need following that disaster. But at least be safe.
Right.
That's the most important
And I know some families have children or family members that have special needs and unique needs, be it physical limitations or medication or even machinery needed to keep them, functioning well. In our closing, couple of minutes, talk to me a little bit about the families that are watching that might be concerned about things like that.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things families just need to prepare for. If they need to have extra, medication, if they need another 90-day supply, they can sometimes get that from a pharmacist as an emergency order. If they have medical equipment, or if they need to get an extra tank of oxygen with them, or an inhaler, or something like that they need to take with them, please see about getting an extra, a spare one or two or three that you can take with you. Because when you do evacuate, you don't know where you're going to have access to those resources again. Obviously, there's hospitals, but they often become overwhelmed. So there's simple things you can do to prepare for your family, especially the families with special needs children.
Right.
And there's a whole lot of other efforts that can be made for special needs children that we don't even talk about here because of each case is so different.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the Red Cross does have a lot of resources that we can provide families with special needs children to kind of help them through that event.
Well, Chad, I'm glad that you've been with us today. It's a great wealth of information, both topics for our viewers. And viewers, I hope that you've paid attention and you feel a little bit more secure. You've got some resources based on what Chad has said and some of the websites that you've seen come up on the screen that you can print a template, be prepared for a disaster, or maybe find out how you can volunteer in any capacity that we've talked about today. So just remember, if you take everything we've talked about today and we all link together, communities and families, we can all spread a little bit of joy in our town. We've enjoyed having you with us today, and we hope that you'll watch us again real soon. Bye-bye.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and is made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town coming to your home every week. Write to Joy in Our Town, Post Office Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.